What's up, guys? Probably not going to have a play on any of these games because it's early season in NHL, NBA. I don't see too many situational angles that are really strong here on the card, but we'll see, I guess. But I'll talk about some of the more interesting angles that are out there, I guess. One on the Anaheim Ducks last night. I think statistically they played that game pretty well. It was closer than the score was, or the score would indicate for most of it. The Bruins were up 3-1 for almost the whole game, from the second period onward, really. And then the Ducks scored 2 goals in the final, 2 minutes of regulation, sent it into overtime, and then won. Fortunately for my wallet, but unfortunately for my favorite hockey team, the Bruins suffered their first loss. It was an overtime loss, but the Ducks, surprisingly, well, maybe not too surprisingly for me because I had money on it, but the Ducks wound up winning the game, which was pretty wild, especially when they were down 2 goals with 2 minutes left. But like I said, statistically, they played better than that score would indicate, than the 3-1 deficit would, at least. They outshot the Bruins, although I think some of that was because they were losing the game, so you tend to take more shots when you're down. But I don't think it was entirely just because of that. I think they did play fairly well, and they were the more physical team, and they out-hit the Bruins. So that is what happened in that game. Tonight, we got numerous different sports on the board here. College football. FAU was at Charlotte in another standalone Conference USA game, I guess is what this is. FAU's down from 5.5 to 3.5, or no, American. I always think it's Conference USA. I get these conferences confused because it seems like the teams have switched between the two. It's the American League. Not the MLB American League. FAU has gone down from minus 5.5 to minus 3.5 as a road favorite, but it looks like they have 59% of the cash and 51% of the tickets, which is odd because the money move the line move looks like it's gone against where this is telling me that the higher cash percentages, so that's a little bit odd. So it looks like maybe there is some money on the home underdog that's driving that number down on Charlotte. I don't have much to say on this at all. FAU just got blown out by UTSA at home, so that doesn't look good. That ended their 2-game win streak. Neither of these teams are very good, but they both are probably better than their records indicate. And Charlotte has a really bad record, but both of these teams have played fairly difficult schedules. Played a couple of teams from the bigger conferences. So FAU, I think, is clearly the better team as they are lined that way. They're the road favorite, but I don't know how significantly, how much better they really are. How significant that discrepancy is between how good these two teams are, I should say. Charlotte had lost a bunch of games in a row, 5 in a row, and finally won at East Carolina, who's one of the bottom teams in this conference. But at least that is kind of a breaker of that negative momentum, and now they get a primetime game against FAU. So, I don't know, maybe Charlotte is in a slightly better spot, but I really have no angle on that at all. In the NHL, got numerous things going on here. Some of these teams played yesterday and some did not. Minnesota, I think, is in the worst spot out of any of the teams on the slate. They're on the road. They're facing, I believe, a third game in 4 days, all in different cities. They played yesterday at Philadelphia, but they got blown out at Philadelphia. And now they're at Washington, which is not that much travel between the two. But Washington had the day off, but Washington's coming off of a big win over New Jersey, I believe, at home. So there are negatives for both of these teams here. Minnesota is not in a good rest spot. Third game in 4 days in different cities is not great. And one of those games, I think, was at home. I'd have to look. I forget. But the travel between yesterday's game and today's game isn't very extreme at all. But they did play yesterday, which is a disadvantage. Washington did not. I don't know what the line movement looks like on this. Washington's coming off a big win as well, though, like I said. So that's what's going on there. This looks like Washington has indeed gone up from minus 107 to minus 120 as a home favorite, even though I think people pretty much see Minnesota as the better team out of these two, and I think they are. But Washington is getting that decent home favorite line. They're getting, it seems like the home ice edge is making it so that Washington is actually a small favorite over Minnesota. Washington's got 97% of the cash, 83% of the tickets. So I would have a slight lean, I guess, to Washington there, but not too much there. One of these teams, I think, when I looked, is coming home from a road trip, which I think is Vancouver. Yeah, they went like way out east. They're coming home from a long road trip, a 5-game road trip, and they finished it off with 2 pretty decent wins. They went 3-2 on the road trip. They come home, they have to face the St. Louis Blues. So I think arguably Vancouver's in a pretty bad spot because of that, but St. Louis actually played yesterday, and Vancouver did not, so that's a disadvantage for St. Louis. They won at Calgary 3-0, which is a pretty decent win there. So neither of those teams are in a great spot either, I would say. So Vancouver is the Rangers next. I don't know if that's much of a look ahead or anything, but Vancouver's on that road trip return from a long road trip, but with 2 days off, and St. Louis had to play yesterday. So that's, again, both teams are kind of in somewhat negative situations that I look for, so it's hard to read what's going into that. Vancouver's gone from minus 180 to minus 190 at home. It looks like they have 76% of the cash and 75% of the tickets. So it looks like a little bit of money has ticked them up a bit. But I think out of the two, Vancouver's spot is probably worse than St. Louis's is. But I don't know for sure. That's a tough game to call. Both teams in negative spots. And then LA at Arizona, I think LA is in a pretty bad spot here, but it looks like LA has the line movement on them, the Kings, and reverse line movement. Somehow it looks that way, even though you would think the Kings would be the public team here, and Arizona's been one of the worst teams in hockey the last couple of years, and LA has been like a playoff team. So you wonder why it looks like the public might be on the Arizona side here, even though Arizona looks a little bit better this year than they have in the past recent years. LA has ticked up from minus 124 to minus 127 as a road favorite. It looks like 53% of the cash, 69% of the tickets on Arizona. So that's odd to me that it looks like more of the money is on LA, and it's driven the number up a little bit because I don't really like LA in the spot. They just beat Arizona at home. So now they play the team they just beat again on the road, and I think they have a bigger game up next, if I remember correctly. So I don't think it's a good spot for LA here. They played the Bruins before they played Arizona. They were able to beat Arizona after that loss to a pretty good Bruins team. Now they had 2 days off, though. They go to Arizona for a 1-game road stand at Arizona, the team they just beat to finish off that 2-game homestand with a 1-1 homestand. They have to go out to Arizona for some strange reason, and then are going to come back home to play Vegas tomorrow, which is that's a pretty big opponent there. It's a pretty big game playing Vegas. So, and they're having to play Arizona, the team they just beat by 3 goals immediately again. So I would only tend to want to look at the Arizona side there due to the situation, but the market looks like it's in the complete opposite direction, which I find to be odd. So no plays on any of these. Those are my thoughts on some of those hockey games that look more interesting. In the NBA, there are a couple of interesting situations. You got Detroit is at Charlotte, and I think Detroit is probably in the worst spot of the two because they're coming off that game that I bet where they covered against the Heat and only lost by 1 at Miami. But they were getting blown out. They were down almost 20 with like 7 minutes left in the game, and they made a ridiculous comeback to get into a position where they could have actually potentially somehow won that game, which is absolutely insane. But after you have that big game against the team that's last year's runner-up in their house and you make that furious comeback at the end, that's a lot of effort to put in. So you got to think that Detroit might be in not the best rest spot after that, maybe a little bit hungover, having to go into Charlotte. Charlotte's a 4-point favorite at home, but it looks like the Pistons do have 73% of the cash and 58% of the tickets, so it's weird that it looks like they have the cash discrepancy on their side. I don't think I would want to be on the Pistons with the game that they're just coming off of there. Denver Nuggets are at Memphis. They've gone up from 3 to 5.5 as a road favorite, but it looks like they have 85% of the tickets, but only 76% of the cash. So it does look like they look like a public road underdog to me there with less money than tickets on them. So it looks like there is some of the more significant bets must be on the Grizzlies here, according to the market discrepancy, even though the line has gone up on the Nuggets for some reason. The Nuggets are coming off that pretty big home opener where they looked good and beat LA. So I don't know if immediately then turning around and having to go on the road, even though I don't think you're going to be unfocused when you're facing a Grizzlies team that's been a good team, a playoff team recently. I don't think that's going to make you unfocused really necessarily either, but I don't think it's the greatest spot for the Nuggets. So I probably would only want to look to the Grizzlies taking the points as the home dog there. And these are all very weak leans, by the way, that I'm talking about here. You got Cavs Thunder. The Cavs at home have gone down from 5 to 3 at home, and it looks like the Thunder have 99% of the cash, even though they only have 67% of the tickets. So it does look like there's pretty significant money on the Thunder that has dropped the line down a couple points, and the market percentages seem to bear that out as well. So it looks like the Thunder might be getting some of the more smart money there, the bigger money. I can kind of see why, I guess, even though I think the Thunder are coming off a kind of surprising blowout win to start the season, which I forget who that was even against, but and I think it might have been on the road too. It might have been at Chicago. Is that what it was? I don't know how good Chicago really is. Yeah, I think it was at Chicago. They won by 20. Now they have the second straight road game at Cleveland, but Cleveland, I believe, won their first game. They went into Brooklyn. Brooklyn might be a little bit down, but Brooklyn still carries kind of that weight in their name, and they do tend to still have like some star power on their team. Cleveland went into Brooklyn and won very dramatically on like basically a buzzer beater 3, I think, at the end of the game. So that's a wild finish in that game. So I don't think Cleveland is really in a great spot. But the Thunder might look a little bit better than they are because they're off that blowout win, and they're facing a second straight road game, even though it's short travel. So I don't know. Cavs, the market looks like it's on the Thunder, so that's probably the way I would lean, and the Cavs being in a worse letdown spot, I would say, after that very dramatic finish. But those are just my thoughts there. I don't think the Knicks are in a good spot at Atlanta. They came off that game where, unfortunately, I lost by half point, where they were winning against the Celtics in the final few minutes of the game, and then wound up not only losing, but failing to even cover, losing by 4, which I think pushed some of the late numbers, which unfortunately I was not on. I was on 3.5. That was totally unfortunate because I think the Knicks actually probably played well enough to win that game, and really it was like missed free throws and some missed shots were really the difference in the game there, because I think statistically they kind of outplayed the Celtics there, but that's a tough game to come off of. They have 63% of the tickets, but only 61% of the cash, even though it looks like the Hawks have gone down actually as well from a 2.5-point favorite to a 1.5-point favorite at home. But I don't think it's a very good spot for the Knicks. I think it's kind of a hangover-ish type of situation. Now they have to travel down south to play the Hawks. Not the greatest spot for the Knicks, I would say. I would lean to the Hawks in that one. And I would lean to the Celtics, who are playing the Heat. It's the Eastern Conference Finals rematch, and I think this is one of the only situations in basketball where revenge is a motivating factor to some extent. And I think it will be for the Celtics, as the way they lost that Game 7 against the Heat. Like Jaylen Brown, I think, got hurt like almost immediately in the game, or was it Tatum? I forget. One of the two best players on the Celtics had like a leg injury in like the first first minute of the game, basically, and the Celtics just couldn't gather themselves. They couldn't recover from that, and they just lost terribly. So they're going to be probably in an angry mood and have this game circled, knowing they get that revenge against the Heat for what just happened a few months ago. Looks like the Celtics are up from a 6.5-point favorite to an 8-point favorite, and I think 7.5, I think, is what they were in that Game 7 at home. They have 91% of the cash and 60% of the tickets, so it looks like there is money on the Celtics. It's driven the number up, and the market percentages seem to show that as well. So I would actually lean to the Celtics, even though it does involve laying a big price there. And the Celtics didn't look that impressive against the Knicks, but the Heat also didn't look that impressive in their final score against the Pistons either. And people might look at that and be like, how did the Heat only win by one and not want to take the Heat because of that? How did they only win by one against awful Detroit? But then again, the Heat were winning by way more than that. Like, they just took their foot off the gas late in the game, and it wound up almost costing them. So I think the final score is not really indicative of how that game turned out, even though luckily I still won my bet on that. Those are my thoughts on the NBA. I don't think I really have thoughts on the other games on the slate, really. Excuse me. It does look like there's some money on the Kings as well, and Warriors-Kings. Just market reading. Driving the Kings up from 2.5 to 3 at home. People might think there's value on the Warriors because they have that massive name recognition and some big stars on their team. Why are they a 3-point dog against the Kings on the road? I believe this is also a rematch of one of the playoff series last year, I think. I don't remember. Did the Warriors knock the Kings? I can't even remember. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I think the Warriors knocked out the Kings and then lost to the Lakers, but I would have to go check that. I'm not sure about that. But if that's the case, if the Warriors did eliminate the Kings last year, that could add some motivation on the Kings side as well. The Kings have 95% of the money, but 71% of the tickets. So it looks like there is money. The more significant money is on them, and it's driven the number up a little bit on them. The Warriors are kind of coming off of that big first game where I believe they lost, though, at home to Phoenix. But that was kind of a big matchup between two big-name teams with stars that were playoff teams last year. Kings are coming off a nice win, too, though, so both teams could be in like a hangover or a letdown spot, maybe, potentially. I think the Kings won in Utah in blowout fashion. I would have to check that, too, but that's that. And then Utah actually looks like they are the market read in their game against the Clippers. I don't really have anything that I see in the situation as far as angles go, but the Clippers are a 3.5-point road favorite. It looks like they have 89% of the tickets, but only 61% of the cash, so it does look like they're a public road underdog in a tough environment. It's tough when you have to go to Utah like that, and you're playing in like higher elevation and whatever. It's a tougher place to play, and you're getting points with Utah at home. Utah's coming off a really ugly first game, I believe, that I just mentioned. I think they got killed by the Kings, so they might be in like a bounce-back spot there, and they're getting points at home. It looks like they are the like kind of anti-public home dog that is getting more of the money than the tickets on them. So I would lean to the Jazz in that one as well, but none of these are strong at all. And we finally have arrived at the World Series, baby. The World Series is beginning tonight. It's Arizona at Texas. Seems to have had a couple of days off so they can kind of line up their game one pitching starting pitchers here. Their starting pitching matchup here. We got Zach Gallen against Nathan Eovaldi. Texas is hosting. They had the better regular season record, of course. Both of these teams were wild cards, but Texas was in the driver's seat in their in the AL West until literally the last game when Houston overtook them. Arizona was battling to even get one of those final wild cards, and they've made it this far, which is crazy because I don't think their pitching is that good. Experience-wise, they don't have as much, but they're here, man. This game looks like Texas has gone up from -150 to -162. They have 85% of the cash, but only 72% of the tickets. So it does look like some of the more significant money is on Texas, which is I don't know how much to read into this. I don't have a strong read on this either. Total's gone down from 8.5, although juiced under at -115, down to 8, juiced under -115. So the total has gone down. Reverse line movement on the total, actually, because the over has 75% of the tickets and 55% of the cash. Part of the thought process there might be that these teams have had multiple days off to get their bullpens rested. They're in order. Like, most of the relievers should be eligible for this game. They should be in play for this game. So the thought might be that the pitching is going to be a little bit better in this game. Zach Gallen against the Rangers. He had a decent season, 3.47 ERA, 1.12 whip overall. So he is one of the better pitchers on Arizona. They're picking him to be their game one starter. So I think it was probably going to be between him and Merrill Kelly for this game. They're going with Gallen against Texas Lifetime in 86 at bats, 256 opponent batting average, which is not bad. It's middle of the road there, but there's not much to take away from that. That's not bad. Nathan Eovaldi was 3.63 ERA on the season. He's pitching for Texas today, 1.14 whip. So his stats on the season were good. With Texas, you weren't sure if it was going to be him or Jordan Montgomery, really, I think, for the first game here, because they were using Montgomery as a game one starter. I think in the previous series is when they used him. Eovaldi hasn't been seen as, these are weird stats that I'm looking at here against Arizona. He hasn't been seen that much by Arizona. Only 3 of their hitters have ever faced him, it looks like, according to this. But out of the 3 of them, they combined for 36 at-bats off of him, which is a lot for only these 3 guys having seen him before. It's Gurriel, Longoria, and Pham, and they're 12 for 36 off of him, a 333 OBA, so that's weird. So that means the majority of Arizona's lineup have never faced Eovaldi before, but the ones who have knocked him around. So that's weird. Yeah, those are conflicting stats there. I would kind of put more weight into the fact that most of the hitters haven't faced him before, so that's kind of wild. So Eovaldi might have a little bit of an early advantage because most of the hitters in Arizona's lineup actually haven't seen him before. I'm looking at ESPN. I'm not sure if ESPN is actually right about that. I always look at ESPN's batter versus pitching stats, but if that is correct, then yeah, I think Eovaldi would have an advantage against most of the Arizona lineup early in the game. So that might have me slightly leaning to Texas there, and the market does seem to be sort of favoring them as well, leaning that way. We will see. Arizona is a team that has the less experience of the two, but I don't know. And then quickly before I get out of here, I will mention that stupid Monday night game there. My lean was on Buffalo. I did not have a bet or anything, of course, but I lost my pick'em pool picks on Buffalo basically right at the end there. Buffalo, the game should have been over. They kind of dominated the game. They were winning 24-10. It looked like Tampa's offense couldn't do anything. Buffalo's defense looked like even though they have some pretty significant injuries, Von Miller's in there. They were playing really well in that game after they'd re-extended the lead back to 14. It was 24-10 with basically Tampa on their final basically what was their final drive of the game. And the drive took 7 minutes. It took forever. And it was extended by 2 penalties on Buffalo's defense on 4th downs, where otherwise the drive would have ended, and it looked like Tampa couldn't do anything. And one of those was a play where they sacked Baker Mayfield, and the defender that sacked him just kind of happened just because the face mask is so big, he kind of just reached his hand over the face mask and did grab it. But that's now a 15-yard penalty in the NFL regardless, even if it's unintentional, which I believe it was for sure. I think it was just that the face mask is big and it just happened to be there, and he was just tackling Mayfield, and that's just where his hand happened to be. That extended the game, and then I believe it was on another 4th down play. It was this ridiculous, tipped pass in the end zone, caught by Mike Evans for a touchdown, and they, for some reason, went for 2 to cut it to 6, because I guess they were saying, well, if we score another touchdown, we want it to be to win the game rather than to tie it. Very weird move by Todd Bowles, I think is the coach of Tampa there. That was an odd decision, but at least I got the Mike Evans touchdown in fantasy to make the fantasy performance from him not a total bust. So that turned my fantasy performance from him around pretty significantly, so that was good at least. But that was a ridiculous drive where Buffalo should have just ended the game 3 times. They basically had the game ended. It would have been over. But then, and the touchdown wound up being on that absurd, tipped pass, somehow caught by Evans in the end zone. Just crazy. And then Tampa actually had one more possession at the end because they still had all of their timeouts left. So they got it back with a very little amount of time left and, of course, couldn't do anything. But they were able to get into position to heave to the end zone. And the final play was kind of weird, too, because nobody even touched the ball. It just landed on the ground. Whatever, I gotta get out of here. That's gonna do it for me. Those are just leans today and my thoughts on the card. No actual plays. Peace out.